Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
The warning from the International Monetary Fund today couldn't be much starker. An exit from the EU, they said, could cause severe regional and global damage against the backdrop of a slashed forecast for global growth for the fourth time in 1 year. Now, forget for 1 second questions of whether the IMF, which contains firm friends of George Osborne and of the EU, should be taking a view on British domestic politics. Forget even that the quote comes from the former economic advisor to Barack Obama, who's already made his own position on Brexit clear. Tonight, those on the Leave side find themselves having to take on a reputable economic body that is forecasting doom for this country outside of the European Union. Is this the kind of statement that makes up a voter's mind? We'll ask Ken Clarke and Dan Hannan in a moment, but first, here's David Grossman.
BBC News on Friday the 24th of June. Good morning. The EU referendum result has been declared and the UK has voted to...
To what? Will it be Brexit with our breakfast? And if so, what will that mean? Plenty are serving us up their opinions. Today, the International Monetary Fund warned that the UK voting to leave the EU could have dire consequences for the global economy. In its latest World Economic Outlook published this afternoon, they warned the planned June referendum on European Union membership has already created uncertainty for investors. A Brexit could do severe regional and global damage by disrupting established trading relationships.
We already see the uncertainty about the referendum result weighing on the UK economy, and a vote to leave would set off a process of 2 years, a lengthy divorce, with a very uncertain settlement at the end. And as anyone who's been to that process knows, it's not a positive event.
For those campaigning to leave the EU, both the timing and substance of this intervention is highly suspect.
I think this is a highly political intervention. I don't believe it's the result of a lot of people with computers sitting down and crunching the numbers and coming to some objective conclusion. I think it reflects the opinions of the EU, of the Eurozone in particular, and I think it's highly convenient for the British government, who no doubt have not exactly discouraged this.
Far from discouraging this assessment, the Chancellor was very keen to reinforce the IMF's anti-Brexit message.
They say if we were actually to leave the EU, there would be a short-term impact on stability and a long-term cost for the economy. So this is the clearest independent warning of the taste of things to come if we leave the EU. I think we're much better off if we stay in the EU. That would make Britain stronger, safer and better off.
The Chancellor hasn't always been so keen to accept the IMF's judgment. Back in 2012, they gave dire warnings about the state of the UK economy, saying the Chancellor was, quote, playing with fire unless he relaxed austerity. George Osborne was furious, but a year later, the IMF admitted they'd got their assessment wrong.
We got it wrong. We acknowledged it. We were not the only one to get it wrong.
Any democratic vote contains a level of uncertainty, and the polls suggest the race is tight. But beyond that, is there any reason to think that life outside the EU would, in the longer term, be any worse than life inside?
People are still going to be buying German cars in this country, and we're still going to be selling Nissan cars in Europe. Trade depends on buyers and sellers, not nearly so much on governments as governments imagine. And were there to be a decision to leave the EU, we would have a period, perhaps 2 years, in which absolutely nothing changed while the negotiations continued. So I think this is way over the top, what the IMF have said.
The IMF is walking a thin line here between giving an economic opinion and intervening in a domestic political question. Listen how hesitant the chief economist becomes when asked if Brexit is too big a risk to take.
I think it's a risk. I think British people have to consider very carefully what the balance is of risks. There are political considerations and political preferences involved as well. But in terms of the pure economics, we would worry about the outcome.
With 10 weeks to go, there'll be plenty more arguments about where the balance of risk lies, and some could get pretty heated, like this exchange in the European Parliament today between a passionate Belgian European integrationist and a pro-Brexit British MEP. Sometimes you don't need a simultaneous translation.
David Grossman there. Well, joining me now, the MEP Dan Hannan of the Vote Leave campaign and former Chancellor Ken Clarke for the Remainers. Very nice to have you both here. Severe global damage, I guess, Dan, is not a phrase that they'd use lightly.
Well, they've been consistently wrong, and they're wrong about this. And actually, they've been wrong in a consistent way. They've consistently underestimated the strength of the UK economy, and they've consistently underestimated the severity of the euro crisis. And I think what you said at the beginning about them being mates, I mean, I'm pretty sure it was actually on Newsnight that I saw George Osborne half promise Christine Lagarde, the former French minister, the job of managing director at the IMF. She made it perfectly clear that her priority was to keep the euro together. The IMF has become a sort of adjunct of the EU in these bailouts. I can see why they want Britain to be a continuing part of those bailouts. We're one of the few countries that has the resources to carry on rescuing others. But the question that we have to face, and the question in a way that we face on the 23rd of June is, do we need to make the Eurozone's problems our problems, or can't we reorient to the rest of the world, which is growing?
Ken Clarke, I think it was Lamont who said it's highly convenient politically, isn't it, for the IMF to come out on George Osborne's side?
Well, Norman's not a friend of mine, but how on earth he can dismiss the IMF as though he's got some sort of secret political motive, or they're all friends of George Osborne's, I don't know. I mean, the IMF joins the Governor of the Bank of England, the G20 finance ministers, President Obama, and most people in the city, and most of the business leaders, the CBI, all of which Eurosceptics have a tendency to wave away as this is scaremongering, alarmist, don't worry, it'll be all right. And although the two people who've gone on tonight are two of their more respectable advocates, they have no clear idea of exactly what will happen if we leave, and there's undoubtedly uncertainty, which is very damaging to economic confidence.
Dan, can we have
and
that?
They just believe that over 2 years they will be able to negotiate a whole new pattern of trading and political relationships with the outside world, and it'll be all right.
Dan Hannan, do you concede that there will be uncertainty and that could be a long-lasting effect on the British economy?
I think it's really important to understand what happens the day after we vote to leave. First of all, we carry on in the current arrangements while we discuss it. Then, on the day that the exit comes into effect, 2, 3, however many years after that, everything remains in place until one side or the other changes it. We've adopted all of the EU's rules on regulations and standardization. There are no tariffs. All the rules on things like reciprocal healthcare would carry on until one side or the other wanted to change. Now, there would be some gradual movement. We'd be embracing, if you like, a different trajectory. But actually, the person who got this absolutely spot on at the launch of the Remain campaign was the leader of the Remain campaign, Lord Rhodes, when he said it won't be a step change, it'll be a gentle process. He said it'll be after 5 years there'll be no change, after 10 years you'll see a little bit of change, and then after 15 years.
Ken Clarke, the way Dan Hannan's described it sounds like a yacht on a bathtub.
Well, we're not going to negotiate anything, apparently. The whole point of the negotiation will be that the winning side, if the Eurosceptics have won, will say we've got to change all this. And in particular, they made it quite clear they want to give up free movement of labour, and they want to give up obeying the rules
But do you
of the trading zone.
Well, going to be
that throws huge uncertainty. Even the risk of Brexit is affecting our economy now. The British economy is slowing down. Our economy has been
how's it doing compared to the Eurozone economy?
And steady on, Dan. And investments on hold. There's no major investment going ahead because nobody will invest.
But let's bring in those
until
points.
they know whether the risk
very
is gone.
strong, and the warning from the IMF.
The pound has weakened.
Well,
the pound has weakened quite a lot because of the uncertainty. And the governor of the Bank of England got shot down by Eurosceptics when he calmed things down by saying he did have plans in case Brexit's taking the clear lead in the opinion polls, led to a flight of capital out of the country. There is uncertainty, and it's no good saying, oh, it's perfectly certain for 2 years nothing will happen. That is not what the Leave campaigners generally are saying.
OK, so Dan Hannan, it's not just whether you think it's going to be stable, it's what the markets do, it's how they react to it. And if there is a spooking, if you like, then that's going to be a lack of investment coming to this country already.
And also, you can't say that for 2 years nothing will change. Your case is everything's got to change.
Since I'm sorry, Ken, I think that was that addressed to me, Emily?
Yes, it was. The whole point of your campaign is you want to change things, and you reassure us by saying for 2 years nothing will change.
Since the referendum was announced in January 2013, this country has received more inward investment than any other country in the EU. This country has created more jobs than any other country, indeed, incredibly, than the other 27 members of the EU put together. So never mind supposition or speculation. As a matter of observable fact, the uncertainty, if you like, the possibility of leaving the EU has not had any deterrent effect on inward investment. I have to say, I remember Ken saying exactly these things 15 years ago about keeping the pound. He said that it would scare away investment, that there would be a run on the pound, a run on the stock exchange and so on.
Not
only was he wrong, but the things that he predicted actually did happen. Let's read out what you said.
Dan, we're running out of time. Let Ken Clarke just answer that last point.
Quite happy to debate the single currency, if you'll allow me to say what I actually said 15 years ago, but it's not what we're talking about now. We have very strongly attracted inward investment because we have one of the least regulated countries in the Western world, and we're in the European Union. The flow of inward investment is at the moment on hold. No British investor or foreign investor is going to invest here till he knows what our trading and political relationships are with the outside world in a few weeks' time.
Okay.
That's why the Governor of the Bank of England, no doubt also part of political conspiracy, had to announce what he would do in case this became a clear flight of capital.
Dan, I'm sorry, I appreciate it's much harder down the line, but we've run out of time. Thank you both very much indeed. Thanks for joining us.
I've been getting